All right, so that should be all connected up. Oh, and the sound was on. All right, took care of that. Excellent. All right, well. Yeah, Arlene didn't mention anything on Sunday as to whether or not she'd be here, so hopefully she is able to come. Otherwise, it's you and I know it'll be very lovely. And also Harriet's notes. We have Harriet's notes to help us as well. And Cricket has said something about attending various Bible studies, so that'll be good to get her involved. She certainly watches this video.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So let's come in with the moment of prayer. Anything that I can pray for you specifically?
Just the people in Louisiana and still the people in Afghanistan.
Yep, absolutely. Let us come together in prayer. Merciful God, we thank you for the opportunity to gather and to study your word. Our hearts are heavy, oh God, as we think of the people who are affected by nature and by the acts of other people. We especially keep in mind those in Louisiana facing the ravages of Hurricane Ida after so many weeks of other storms hitting other areas and so much damage down there. But currently, it is the people of Louisiana affected by Ida that we are especially lifting up. We also keep in mind, oh God, those who are stranded in Afghanistan, stranded, feeling uncertain, cut off, and lost. Your people around this world are vulnerable, oh God. Help us who have resources to find ways to be your hands, your feet, your heart in this world. Amen.
Amen.
So today I have quite a few different women to talk about.
This was I thought this was a tough one.
Yeah.
Tough to read just because of all the names and to keep track of everyone. Bit violent.
A bit violent, yes, a bit.
So yeah. And yeah. I didn't get to read as much further on that I wanted to, but yeah, I did read it.
Yeah, there's a lot going on, and really the main thing that I wanted to focus on was Judges 4 and also Judges 5, because that's just a musical form of Judges 4. But then I also brought in that tiny little story in Judges 9 about the woman of Thebes, because that also ties in with Ja-el's actions in Judges 4, and then the story about Judith. Now, Judith, that's a book that's not in our the regular Protestant Bible because it's in the Apocrypha. And it's another one of these books that, I have it in my study Bible. And so when I was making all
I had to have it too.
Right. But then I realized, oh, wait a minute, this is a book that isn't really standard. And so, I still want to talk a little bit about Judith's actions, because it's another, widow in a vulnerable situation, making some interesting choices to make herself even more vulnerable. But because it's not in because it's one of the apocryphal books, I figured I shouldn't make the same mistake that I did several weeks ago.
Where we couldn't find it.
Right, exactly. So that's why there's so much today, is because it really all ties in together in terms of themes. The Bible does have a lot of violence towards women, and troublingly, it doesn't specifically condemn it. But this book that I've been working with, Women in the Bible, It talks about how kind of in the beginning of Judges, while yes, there's a lot of violence, women have a little bit more agency at the beginning of Judges, and then later on in Judges, where you had, after this long history of, the people of Israel did as they wanted, and there was, there was no one listening to God or whatever, and you see this increasing cycle of people in Israel doing as they wanted, and God saying you're not doing the right thing, and the people repent, and then they do a little better for a while, and then they do what is evil in the Lord's sight, and there is no one to tell them what to do, and if God punishes them, and you see this increasing cycle, and increasingly throughout that cycle as you see more and more violence towards women, so that it gives the impression, read through a certain lens, that one of the things that Israel did that was so the evil in the sight of the Lord was trafficking women. So while it doesn't necessarily come out and say violence towards women is bad, if you read it through certain lenses, you can see that effect and you can see that message. So anyway, that was one of the points that Jamie Clark Souls makes in this particular book, which it's been a very interesting and difficult read at times, because there's a large section of the book where the title is the chapter title is Women and Violence in the Bible, and it's true, and it makes for some really tough and troubling stories. So I so understand, the idea that it's tough to get through some of these because they are texts of terror, as Phyllis Trimble.
Yeah.
Yep. She actually has a book titled Texts of Terror, where she talks about 4 of the texts that are particularly troubling. I think it's only 4, and but there's so many, and we don't talk about them. So, and once again, I'm experiencing allergies, so I have water with me, and hopefully I can keep everything under control. Anyway, so where, what were you able to read and get through, and was there anything in particular in what you were able to read that you want to hone in on right now, or shall we start with maybe something that you hadn't been able to get to?
Well, I did read Deborah and Barak. The Song of Deborah and Barak, I found that very hard to read and get through.
Yeah.
It's just wordy is all
Exactly.
I can think of. I had already done that.
Yep.
And then I did read about Judith. One of the things I found fascinating is that Deborah was serving as a judge.
Yes.
I mean, I thought, wow, that's quite the power she
did.
had.
She had a lot of power and agency. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So Barak is, he's the military leader, but Deborah, she is the wise person who, she arbitrates, she makes rulings, she judges. And while Barak is nominally the military leader, Deborah's the one who tells him, this is what you should do and when and why. So really, she has that strategic mind. He's just
and then he says, I will go if you go with me, but if you don't go with me, I won't go either.
Right. Yes. Yeah. It's
wow.
It's really fascinating.
Puts a lot of power.
A lot of power
in her.
Yeah. Yeah. And once again, while Deborah had so much power, both Deborah and Barak have been treated rather cruelly by commentators over the years. Barak is portrayed as a weakling, someone who needed to have, the comforting presence of this motherly figure. And I'm like, Okay, commentators. You have it wrong. Because, Barak, he actually serves an important voice in terms of being cautious. When we just dive into various endeavors, Deborah's saying, you should go out and do this right now. And he's like, wait a minute, let's look at this from a variety of angles. Caution isn't necessarily bad. Let's see here. Now, the funny thing is, as you noted, this is another one of the books that I've been using, preaching the women of the Old Testament. And the reason why I keep saying what books I'm using is I don't want to be accused of plagiarism. Excuse me. But this commentator says about Deborah, this text presents Deborah in a very positive light. She is respected for her wisdom, intelligence, initiative, and connection with God. Deborah confidently exercised leadership and made decisions. She told a military man what to do and when to do it. These were not ordinary roles for women in her time, but God spoke through her as God did through other prophets. Mm-hmm. The Israelites trusted her enough to seek her advice and judgment. Barak valued her direction and presence. Despite this unabashedly positive treatment of a female character, the Christian tradition has not always acknowledged Deborah's significance. Some commentaries suggest that the secret to her success was not that she was a strong and gifted woman, but that she acted like a man. Oh. Matthew Henry said that she was the weaker vessel, yet possessed the stronger faith and a masculine courage. The French Jesuit Pierre Lemoyne wrote in the 17th century that occasionally souls of the first magnitude may be found in the bodies of the second sex. Ooh. Oh, wow. Yes, wow. Exactly.
That's amazing.
Exactly. Right. Some commentators insist that it was highly unusual for God to work through a woman in this way, and only did so when men failed to take on leadership roles. It's like, yeah, and you can see all of the strong misogyny and patriarchy and all of that. In the 16th century, Balthasar Hubmeier wrote that normally women remained silent in their homes, but when men were afraid and were acting like women, the women should speak up and take on the manly role as Deborah had done.
Wow.
And John Calvin, whom I've had words out before, insisted that Deborah's story was an extraordinary event that did not give permission for women to exercise leadership in public life. If men obeyed God, he said, women would not have to function in a way that was foreign to them. A woman leader was simply too dangerous. Wow. Calvin concluded that Deborah was not a role model, but an exception to the rule that women were incapable of independence, courage, and leadership.
Unbelievable.
And that is our faith history.
They just can't let a woman be powerful or be capable. Right. They have a reason.
Yes.
Always a reason why she did what she did.
Yes. And we still see it playing out today.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I loved your little remark about women in politics. And what you hear is about what they're wearing, their hair, whatever. We never get that with male politicians. Well, and I shouldn't say that. I think they made fun of Barack Obama because he wore a beige suit coat or something one time.
Right, which other, white male presidents have certainly worn.
Right.
Democrat and Republican.
Yep.
But yes, yeah. And but there again, you have someone who, in Barack Obama this time, not Barack the general.
Right.
He's Black.
Right.
He's from a non-white ancestry. So you have this demeaning tone to put him in his place.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah. So, now my introduction to Deborah and Ja-el was actually through Ja-el. I knew that Deborah and Barak, that was, a story about something. But then it was actually in a preaching class, and I was randomly assigned this character that I'd never heard of before, Ja-el. And so it was through Ja-el's story, starting at verse 17 in Judges 4, that I began to be aware of these various characters. So there's an introduction to the story. Yeah.
Now, would the intention be that Barak should have killed him, right? In that confrontation or not? I mean,
anything can happen in war. People run away, people do weird things. Deborah herself says, and we don't know with verse 9.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at.
Right. When that line came in, in verse 8, Barak says, if you will go with me, I will go, but if you will not go with me, I will not go. And Deborah said, I will surely go with you. Nevertheless, the road on which you are going will not lead to your glory, for the Lord will sell Sisera into the hand of a woman.
Right.
And honestly, I don't know if that is a verse that was put in afterwards. I honestly don't know.
Because you could look at it as her having a prophecy of what's going to happen.
Right.
Or she's just referring to herself.
She could be
going with him.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It reminds me a little bit of in Lord of the Rings, the one evil character, the Sauron is, it's known that no man can slay him. And in that, one of the final battles, there's this, big back and forth battle, this big fight between the evil character and this rather weak looking knight or warrior or whatever. And this knight, stabs the Sauron, and he says, ha ha ha, no man can kill me. And she rips off her helmet and says, I am no man.
I like that.
Yes. And so when I'm reading Judges 4, I have that image in my head, is this Lord of the Rings battle between, this evil king and this woman who says, I am no man. Die. Die, evil character. So I don't know if Deborah is talking about herself, if she's along with Barak, then perhaps she will be the one to kill Sisera. We have no idea who exactly she's talking about, or, as I said, if this line was put in afterwards, as a, kind of taking the agency away from Ja-el. But let's read through Judges 4. Let's see here. Do you want to do part of it and then I do part of it?
Let me see. Yeah, I mean, I'll struggle with the names, just so you know. You start, and then I'll finish.
All right. I'll go through.
And I have the good news version.
All right, and I've got the incomprehensible revised standard version.
Okay.
All right. So this is Judges 4, and starting at the beginning. And it's only 24 verses total. So I'll probably go through verse 16, and then you can pick up in verse 7.
Okay. Yep.
That's a pretty good breaking point. The Israelites again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord after Ehud died. So the Lord sold them into the hand of King Jabin of Canaan, who reigned in Hazor. The commander of his army was Sisera, who lived in Harosheth Hagoyim. Then the Israelites cried out to the Lord for help, for he had 900 chariots of iron and had oppressed the Israelites cruelly 20 years. At that time, Deborah, a prophetess, wife of Lapidoth, was judging Israel. She used to sit under the palm of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim, and the Israelites came up to her for judgment. She sent and summoned Barak, son of Abinoam, from Kadesh in Naphtali, and said to him, "The Lord, the God of Israel, commands you, go take position at Mount Tabor, bringing 10,000 from the tribe of I'm going to actually try to pronounce this correctly, Naphtali, and the tribe of Zebulun. I will draw out Sisera, the general of Jabin's army, to meet you by the Wadi Kishon with his chariots and his troops, and I will give him into your hand." Barak said to her, "If you will go with me, I will go. But if you will not go with me, I will not go." And she said, "I will surely go with you. Nevertheless, the road on which you are going will not lead to your glory, for the Lord will sell Sisera into the hand of a woman." Then Deborah got up and went with Barak to Kadesh. Barak summoned Zebulun and Naphtali to Kadesh, and 10,000 warriors went up behind him, and Deborah went up with him. Now Heber the Kenite had separated from the other Kenites, that is, the descendants of Hobab, the father-in-law of Moses, had encamped as far away as Elon Bezananim, which is near Kadesh. When Sisera was told that Barak, son of Abinoam, had gone up to Mount Tabor, Sisera called out all his chariots, 900 chariots of iron, and all the troops who were with him, from Harosheth Hagoyim to the Wadi Kishon. Then Deborah said to Barak, "Up, for this is the day which the Lord has given Sisera into your hand. The Lord is indeed going out before you." So Barak went down from Mount Tabor with 10,000 warriors following him. And the Lord threw Sisera and all his chariots and all his army into a panic before Barak. Sisera got down from his chariot and fled away on foot, while Barak pursued the chariots and the army of Harosheth Hagoyim. All the army of Sisera fell by the sword. No one was left. And your turn.
Sisera ran away to the tent of Ja-el, the wife of Heber the Kenite, because King Jabin of Hazor was at peace with Heber's family. Ja-el went out to meet Sisera and said to him, "Come in, sir, come into my tent, don't be afraid." So he went in, and she hid him behind a curtain. He said to her, "Please give me a drink of water, I'm thirsty." She opened a leather bag of milk, gave him a drink, and hid him again. Then he told her, "Stand at the door of the tent, and if anyone comes and asks you if anyone is here, say no." Sisera was so tired that he fell sound asleep. Then Ja-el took a hammer and a tent peg, quietly went up to him and killed him by driving the peg right through the side of his head and into the ground. When Barak came looking for Sisera, Ja-el went out to meet him and said to him, "Come here, I'll show you the man you're looking for." So he went in with her, and there was Sisera on the ground dead, with the tent peg through his head. That day, God gave the Israelites victory over Jabin, the Canaanite king. They pressed harder and harder against him until they destroyed him.
This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Yes.
So I find the little, he asked for water and she gave him milk. Is there any significance?
Oh, yes.
To that, okay.
Oh, yes. Yes, there's actually lots in Ja-el's story. Yeah, I tend to pronounce J's with a Y sound. A lot of people pronounce it with a J sound. So it's really,
Ja-el, you say Ja-el?
I say Ja-el,
okay.
but I've certainly heard Ja-el, lots of other pronunciations.
I'm just bad because I read them as I see them. It's, it was always a joke when I was a kid. They go, "Diane, say this word." And I would just say it exactly as it was spelled out.
I have always been terrible at phonics. And yeah, my family, they finally had to do see and say to get me to be able to read. It took a very long time. So I have a really hard time figuring out how to pronounce things. So I never criticize harshly ever, because I certainly struggle with it myself. And so yes, my comment about the J's, that's that's how I do it. And
right.
Really, however it flows out of your mouth, the intention is there.
Right.
That's the way I look at it.
Right.
So, yep. But yes, Ja-el she's an interesting character. You know, the story, you know, here she is. She was the wife of one of the various, you know, allied generals to Sisera. Her name itself, Ja-el, there's some scholarship that says that her name tells you that Yahweh was her God. The Ja, that's you know, the first syllable of Yahweh, and then El is one of the words for God. And so the way that they're linked up, you have that possessiveness. Yahweh is my God. And so even though she was the wife of Heber, and therefore culturally, religiously, etc., she was supposed to be following whatever Heber's religion and culture, etc., was. Because of her name being Ja-el, there's this question of, you know, where were her actual loyalties? So that's one thing. The other thing is Sisera himself put Ja-el in a very uncomfortable position. You know, she's the wife of one of his allied generals, and so he's approaching her, a woman alone in her tent, and it's actually culturally a very shameful thing that he does, asking her to hide him. Your text said that she hid him behind a curtain. My text has that she hid him under a rug. And oftentimes the sleeping bedclothes were called bed rugs. So there's a lot of question as to whether or not Sisera actually raped Ja-el.
Oh,
yeah. And the text, by phrasing things, you know, that he asked her for water and she gave him milk, the text is trying to put the responsibility on Ja-el for what Sisera may or may not have done. But the fact that it does say that she gave him milk, there's actually a lot of question of whether or not he where that milk came from, I should say.
Okay.
Yeah. And so yeah, it's a violent text. And when you frame it in this idea that Sisera himself put Ja-el in a vulnerable position and possibly raped her as well, the fact that she, you know, once he was, you know, in this sleeping stupor, took a tent peg and stabbed him through the temple makes a lot more sense.
It does.
It does. It really, really does. Yeah. So that was a very good question.
And that would make sense, because I mean, no place really does it give any reason for her to kill him.
Yeah.
You know, that's what kept throwing me. I'm like, well, why did she kill him?
Why did she kill him?
It's not giving me any reason for that. But you saying that, and because of the times, which he probably would have taken advantage of her,
Yes.
So yeah, now that makes a lot more sense to me why she did that.
Yay, biblical scholarship.
So I'm just thinking, wow, that was really violent for no reason that I can, think of. But yeah, no, that makes a lot more sense. Yeah.
Yeah, because you're right. Looking at the surface, you have the wife of an ally,
Right.
killing. What kind of shame would that bring to her husband? And but on the other hand, by even just Sisera asking Ja-el to hide him in her tent, Sisera is bringing shame, culturally speaking. He's bringing shame on her husband.
Yeah.
So even culturally speaking, even with just that, Hebor would have been within his rights to take action against Sisera. The fact that Ja-el does it, it's just, she is claiming her own story, her own agency.
And really that makes Sisera a very weak man to do that.
Yep.
I mean, he was using his power to do it, but it was really a weakness. I think that he did that.
Yeah. Here he was running away from the battle, feeling, he's looking for safety and security. He's left all of his troops on the battlefield as he runs away. Yeah. On some level, you could say that he knows that he's already a dead man, because imagine going back to King Jabin or Jabin, what would that king have said to him?
Right.
For running away like that. So he's looking to hide. He's not able to face his own honor or lack thereof. Mm-hmm. And so you're right, he probably was trying to feel powerful again. Mm. And how did he go about doing it? By taking advantage of someone who is vulnerable.
Right. Which, boy, that's a reflection, isn't it, of all times?
Yep.
Of what people do.
Yep. Yeah. So this is a very interesting story, because on the one hand you have, Deborah the prophetess, who's treated very well in the text in a lot of ways, but then throughout history has been discarded, discredited. Look at her shoes, look at what she's wearing, all of that. But the text has her as an outwardly very strong character. Mm-hmm. And then you have Ja-el, who the text treats as a very submissive, devious character. And yet she had her own strength too. Mm-hmm. She claimed back her sense of dignity by killing him, by killing Sisera, because he had taken advantage of her. Yeah, it's not one of the cleanest stories in the Bible. It's very, very violent. But it's also inspiring in a lot of ways, because you have this sense of you are worth something. Even if people try to tell you that you're not worth anything, even if people try to take advantage of you, you are worth something. You are worth life. You are worth dignity. And so that's why, as difficult and as violent as it is, that's why I like this story so much, is because it's about being certain that even when you're vulnerable, you are still worth certain dignities. You're worth having your own space. You're worth your life. Right. And if someone tries to take that away from you by force, then they're not acting in any good way towards you. Yeah. it's a story of power. It's a story of presence. And then Judges 5 is it's a duet between Barak and Deborah. And you can actually, when we're able to actually read through it, you can actually see the tone change between the two of them. Them singing back and forth. But it's the same story as Judges 4.
Except with this one, in the end, they have Sisera's mother.
Yes.
Involved, which is interesting.
Yes.
And he's not coming home, and she's wondering why.
Yeah.
And I like that they're only finding things to capture and divide, a girl or two for every soldier.
Mm-hmm.
Rich cloth for Sisera, embroidered pieces for the neck of the queen.
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting that somebody was trying to calm her down here, that he was just out there being a boy soldier.
Right.
doing what they do.
Right. Boys will be boys doing what they do. And her baby's coming home to her.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no. So then, keeping in mind with the whole killing generals and all that jazz, because it's always fun. That's why I then also included the story from Judges 9.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Abimelech, he ruled over Israel for 3 years. Some of this background isn't in the couple of verses that I put in, but basically Abimelech had done some. He'd killed a lot of people, and there was a lot of bad blood between himself and other folks. For example, the lords of Shechem. This says that the lords of Shechem dealt treacherously with Abimelech. This happened so that the violence done to the 70 sons of Jerubbaal might be avenged, and their blood might be laid on their brother Abimelech. So there's a lot going on in terms of the rulers, and basically Abimelech was lots of fighting, because that's what tends to happen. And Abimelech was trying to kill the lords of Shechem, but Abimelech himself, he wasn't a good guy. Neither were the lords of Shechem, and so he trapped the lords in this tower, this stronghold, and he tried to and they tried to set fire on the tower so that all the people would die. And then they did. They killed all the lords of Shechem, but Abimelech wasn't done, and he had more people to go after, and that's when he went to Thebes, which is Judges 9, verse 50. And this was the bit that I had shared. Again, it's a tiny little verse that is the relevant part, but we need greater context to know what's going on. So starting in verse 50, I'll read. Then Abimelech went to Thebes and encamped against Thebes and took it. But there was a strong tower within the city, and all the men and women and all the lords of the city fled to it and shut themselves in. And they went to the roof of the tower, which is actually an echo of what had happened to the lords of Shechem. So you're thinking, okay, same thing's going to happen. Abimelech came to the tower and fought against it, and came near to the entrance of the tower to burn it with fire. It worked once, it'll work again. But a certain woman threw an upper millstone on Abimelech's head and crushed his skull. Immediately, he called to the young man who carried his armor and said to him, "Draw your sword and kill me, so people will not say about me, a woman killed him." So the young man thrust him through, and he died. When the Israelites saw that Abimelech was dead, they all went home. Thus God repaid Abimelech for the crime he committed against his father in killing his 70 brothers. And God also made all the wickedness of the people of Shechem fall back on their heads, and on them came the curse of Jotham, son of Jerubbaal. Yeah, can't talk. So yeah.
Interesting that it would be a woman. Yep. She's not named.
Nope, a certain woman.
Just a woman.
Yep.
Huh.
Yep. So, the tactic that worked at Shechem is foiled as thieves by an anonymous woman.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's just fascinating that they're in the Bible here and there.
Yeah.
They're always strong.
Yes.
They're always strong women.
Yeah. Yep. Women who take action.
Yep. Yeah.
I mean, that's not to say that someone else on top of the tower couldn't have tossed a millstone down and had really good aim. And, perhaps many of them were tossing stones down, and it just so happened that hers hit him.
Yeah.
And released all of these people from having to fight each other. They were able to go back home, lick their wounds, try to reestablish who they were as a people. But yeah.
But to actually say it was a woman, to me, is a huge deal.
Yep.
Could have very easily not said that.
It could have.
No one would have known.
Especially with Abimelech saying, someone else kill me before the stone kills me. It's like, okay, you have a fatal wound. You're dead.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was shameful to Abimelech to have been killed by a woman.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. My commentaries don't actually say much about this woman at all.
Right.
The only reason why I knew of it was because in the yellow one, she's actually listed as just this anonymous woman of Thebes. Let's see, where is it? Yes. When God is depicted as a warrior deliverer, God is depicted as male. Male and warrior go together in people's minds. There are, however, women warriors. Think of Deborah, Ja-el, Judith in the Apocrypha, and the woman of Thebes in Judges 9. And that's the only thing that any of my commentaries have, or at least any of my current commentaries have about this one little woman. And so I had to go on a search of, wait a minute, what's going on here? So here we have, Sisera being killed by Ja-el.
Mm-hmm.
He engaged in shameful behavior, and the things that culturally would have been shameful behavior, that is to say, running away from battle, approaching the wife of one of his allies when she was alone. Those are the things that culturally would have been listed as shameful. Mm-hmm. And we today, when we're reading this text going, wait a minute, what's really going on here? And we say, was she raped? That culturally for us is a concern, but even at that, it's more of a, we don't have, we're getting better about listening to the stories of people who have experienced sexual trauma.
Yeah.
But we're still not really good at it. There's still a lot of victim blaming that goes on.
Yeah.
And it makes it, even in our culture today, I mean, some of us are perfectly willing to say Sisera did a bad thing by raping Ja-el, if that's what happened.
Yeah.
There's always that disclaimer.
Yep.
And I mean, I don't have any proof other than reading between the lines of the text, which, there's problems in that too. I believe that Sisera did indeed rape Ja-el. And so from my viewpoint, he engaged in shameful behavior from that, worse than shameful behavior, but but yeah, so here we have, on the one hand, the story of a woman killing a general for his shameful behavior, but culturally speaking, the things that the culture lists as shameful behavior aren't necessarily what she was killing him for. And then you have, on the other hand, this anonymous woman who is desperate. I mean, she doesn't want to get burned down like the people of Shechem. And here she is stuck in this tower with all these other people, and she happens to make a lucky throw. and this ruler, it just says that Abimelech ruled over Israel. But I don't think that it necessarily gives him any other sort of title. But for him, being killed by a woman was shameful.
Yeah.
It's not any of his behavior.
Right.
Shameful. It is being killed by a woman. So, yeah, it's very interesting how, yes, these women are strong. They're taking agency. They're doing what needs to be done, even when it is violent. And we have a hard time talking about it. There's this idea, culturally speaking, that women aren't supposed to be violent. Yeah. And yet here we have these women who are saying, I'm going to do what needs to be done so that I can live.
Right.
Yeah. So how does a culture of nonviolence work when there is so much violence? How does this idea of you have people who are vulnerable being told to not be violent when there is violence perpetuated against us? So Harriet says about texts of terror, about Ja-el's story, where Ja-el took a tent peg and drove it through the temple of the sleeping Sisera. That text gave me goosebumps, as I have seen many tent pegs that are sharp and some very large, so I can picture it clearly. A story that was to the point, so to speak, making that section a quick read. No question as to what did happen there. And that no questions as to what happened there, that refers to one of her earlier observations, that sometimes these stories about women in the Bible are missing so many details. And we don't know what's actually happening. Even in Ja-el's, while we can see, an outline of some of the events, we don't know specifically Ja-el's motivations, although we can supply them. Now, the passage from Judith that I mentioned, so Judith is one of the few women who actually has her own book in the Bible, but it is in the Apocrypha. So even that, it's not really included in quote, the regular Bible. And even in Judith's own book, she herself is not named as a character until chapter 8. Before that is all of the setup of how, Israel was in trouble, and, they were being attacked, and, they were in distress, and the people, were complaining, and they didn't know if they were going to live, and they didn't know what to do. And, the people are, crying out that God save them, of course, but they don't actually trust that God will save them. And, the people of Israel are attacking the leaders for not leading them very well. And the leaders are going, we don't know what to do. We're up against a big enemy and we don't know what to do, and we're all going to die. And oh no, what happens? And then finally in chapter 8, Judith actually has some agency in her own book. But the first part of it is they have to set up her character, saying what a good and noble and what a good example of womanhood she was. What a perfect example of womanhood she was. So they have to first basically talk about her hair and her clothes.
Yeah, she was beautiful in appearance and was very lovely to behold.
Yep. So once they've established that that she was that she was beautiful, that she dressed as she was supposed to dress, that she had taken the proper time for her mourning after her husband died, that she did everything according to the law, then and only then do you see her actually speaking up to the elders. But they first had to establish that her hair and her clothes are good. And then she really takes them to task. Listen to me, rulers of the people of Bethulia. What you have said to the people today is not right. You have even sworn and pronounced this oath between God and you, promising to surrender the town to our enemies unless the Lord turns and helps us within so many days. Who are you to put God to the test today and to set yourself up in the place of God in human affairs? She really takes the rulers to task for selling the town. And so she ends up having a lot of agency. But what she ends up proposing is that she be captured by the enemy and that she spend time in the enemy camp. And basically that she seduce him. And then in doing so, once she gains the trust of the enemy leader, she ends up beheading him. But, she goes through the series of hosting banquets and going to his banquets and really being in a position of vulnerability, even though, she keeps being reassured, kind of tongue in cheek, that she'll be safe. There's still this thread of, she's very vulnerable. And Holofernes, the enemy leader, holds a banquet finally. And let's see, chapter 12, verse 10 says, on the fourth day, Holofernes held a banquet for his personal attendants, only he did not invite any of his officers. He said to Bagoas, the eunuch who had charge of his personal affairs, go and persuade the Hebrew woman who is in your care to join us and to eat and drink with us, for it would be a disgrace if we let such a woman go without having intercourse with her. If we do not seduce her, she will laugh at us. So she's being called into this banquet so that she can be raped, essentially.
And then to say, if we do not seduce her, she will laugh at us.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, that does really ring true to me.
Right.
And so, it becomes a violent story because of violence against her. And then she beheads him.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So here we again have the same, or at least a similar situation in a lot of ways. You have a woman who's in a vulnerable position. And yes, the argument could be made that she put herself in that position. She made herself vulnerable.
Right.
But they didn't have to say, we're going to seduce her. Essentially, we're going to rape her. But they didn't. The Old Testament doesn't actually have a word for rape when it is in this situation.
Okay.
The only time that it alludes to rape as rape is in terms of the dishonor that one man makes against another man by shaming or dishonoring that man's like wife or second concubine or whatever. But it's not, rape isn't in the Old Testament man to woman, it's man to man. It's about honor and shame, but it's not about the violence against a woman.
Right.
Which is why you have language like what you have in Judith. Very troubling.
Yeah.
Really, really troubling. But yes, so Judith gets back her own.
Yeah, I didn't get to read Judith. I will when I have time. But yeah, because it is long, but it looks like an interesting story.
It really is. It's violent. It's tough. It's very difficult. And I'm really skimming over some of the deep violence in it because we've got 3 minutes left.
Right.
And because I probably won't be actually using this as part of Sunday's scripture.
Yeah.
Simply because, it's not in our regular Bible.
Exactly.
But it's still, it's still part of the texts that are included in some of the biblical accounts. And it still is another example of a woman who has agency, who is trying to protect her people, who is very, very vulnerable and makes a really tough call to put herself into that vulnerable position. But she still should have had the assurance of safety and security, even though she was in that vulnerable position. And so, yeah, she is though able to behead this general, and she's able to get out of the camp with his head.
Yes, I saw that.
Yes, and get back to her own people. And so everything works out, but it's so violent. And a lot of that is the violence that Judith herself experiences. And at the end of it, the Israelites are celebrating their victory, because God delivered them and everything. And yes, Judith has her own song. But you have to wonder just how much this whole experience affected her. At the end of it, it says that Judith she remained on her own estate for the rest of her life, and she was honored throughout the whole country. Many desired to marry her, but she gave herself to no man all the days of her life.
And isn't there a bit of a theme with, all these women put themselves in vulnerable positions to do what they have to do.
To survive. Right.
Yeah.
And that is often the excuse that is given. What were you doing walking down that street?
Right.
What were you doing wearing those clothes?
Right.
So, yeah, there is that thread, that Tamar dressed like a prostitute and put herself on that road so that she could proposition.
Sorry, got a phone call. Let me quick.
Yep.
Hello. He's not home right now. You're gonna have to call back later, okay? His name is Rich. Yep. This evening would be good. Okay. Okay. Bye-bye. Somebody want Richard to work on a lawnmower, and I wasn't going to commit to that one. So
yep. I understand. But that's okay. Back to your point. There is a lot of this you can read in these stories that and make the argument that yes, Tamar put herself in a vulnerable position and Ruth put herself in a vulnerable position.
But as a woman, they had to.
Right. In order to get the security that they needed in order to live. And so then when you look at our own culture around rape and violence against women, there is still this thread of, well, what did you do to put yourself in that position?
Right.
And you can see how we would have that in our culture, even though we don't really talk about some of these stories in our faith classes.
Right.
There's still this underlying thread of, well, if you've been attacked, then somehow your fault.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if Tamar had been properly taken care of according to the rules of the society, she would not have had to make the choice that she did.
Right.
If Ruth had had other opportunities, she would not have had to make the choice that she did.
Exactly.
If the elders of Judith's village had made other choices, she would not have felt like she needed to make the choices that she did.
Right.
So it's not just about these choices that these women are making. It's about what set up the situation.
Right. It's about society.
Yes.
Yeah.
Bingo.
Yeah.
It's about society and the violence that we do to each other.
Right.
So,
well, I thought, gee, just the two of us, we're not going to have anything to talk about, but I was wrong, wasn't I?
Oh, yes. There's always stuff to talk about. But yeah, I know that you should probably get going and I should get going, but let's have a very quick prayer and head out. Merciful God, we know that you cry when you see your children acting with violence towards one another. And it is not just the physical violence by which we do harm, but emotional and mental violence, the kind that breaks down ourselves from the inside. God, help us recognize when situations are being put up that force people to make decisions they should never have to make. Help us to mitigate those times. Help us to eliminate the need for vulnerable decisions, desperate, vulnerable decisions. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Andrea. I enjoyed that.
Thank you, Diane.
See you Sunday.
See you Sunday.